ranks us 38th. And I have the feeling that if Long Island stood alone, we'd be close to the top. We'd be first. Well, I think we'd be at least first. So what do you think about that?
Well, thank you for the question. I can tell you that we have the facts on that, and I need to start by saying I am not advocating statehood for Long Island. But given that...
But there is a bill.
Fortunately, I don't get to vote on it. But given that, we did a recent analysis, and Education Week has done a recent analysis, and Long Island as a state comes in about 23rd in population. So we're not doing apples and oranges. In the nation, we would be the 23rd most populous state. We would be the first in graduation rates. We would be the first in college attendance rates. We would be the first in Intel winners, the first over California, which has a larger population than Long Island by a little bit, and would only be second to Maryland and Massachusetts on a small number of issues. So we're in the top 3 at worst and the top in the rest. And in terms of expenditures, I just need to add, and I beg your pardon for taking too much time, but when the state puts out its cost analysis relative to the differentiated cost of living in different parts of the state, and we use that to assess what Long Islanders are charging per pupil on average compared to the rest of the state, we come in below the county median in expenditures, below. And that's still coming in number 1. And our recommendation is don't bring the island down, bring everybody up to our level. They deserve it. The kids statewide deserve to be what they can get on Long Island. Thank you, Senator.
Questions?
Just one. On school consolidation, you said basically providing reasonable financial incentives. It seems like, and I have a school district that has, an assembly district that has 20 school districts in it. These always invariably break down on, where there's multiple school districts being considered, that there are winners and losers. How do you really come up with a one-size-fits-all kind of incentive? I mean, how would you approach that?
That's something that we would love to sit down with the committee of representatives with and participate in. I can't give you a short answer that would be intelligent. I'd rather not give one that's dumb. But we would be more than pleased to sit down with you as a group and work on those kinds of issues because we think that can be done.
Quick question, if you could elaborate on your idea about expanding the use of teaching assistants, because comparisons you made to other professions, the training requirements for nursing assistants is much greater than we have for teaching assistants now.
Yes, that's true. However, if you look at the difference in the training requirement for a doctor versus a PA or a lawyer versus a legal aid, it's a comparable situation. So right now, teaching assistants are required to have 2 years of college or the equivalent, or pass a test that's the equivalent to that. We think that there are the capability of using master teachers to supervise TAs and provide direct instruction to children on a much more cost-effective manner, so that the TA will not necessarily make decisions that are educational, but will implement the teacher's decisions in working with those students. And that's, again, something we'd be happy to sit down and work out the details of, but we don't believe that's impossible.
Senator.
The concept of a master teacher, I'm old enough to remember that the principal used to be the master teacher.
Correct.
In your school. You may not know it, but I taught for 20 years in the city. Department heads were in there. I taught in the high schools. The teachers, and then you had some assistants that where you needed it to help the teachers out. But the concept of teaching assistants, taking over and having a master teacher direct teaching assistants, how does that conflict with the fact that you have principals at schools who are allegedly, by definition, the master teachers in those schools?
Fair question, Senator. The principals have had so much added to their plate in terms of administrative requirements and interactions with parents and staff that they unfortunately, including the new APPR requirements, will be spending most of their time doing anything but giving individual direction to staff regarding individual students. The principal in an average elementary school on Long Island, barring the few districts that have 20 or 30 students in them, probably has 40 to 50 staff members in it. We're not looking at that kind of ratio. We're talking about a master teacher working with perhaps 3 to 5 assistants or teaching assistants. If you want to give me a principal to every 3 to 5 teachers, I can run the same model. It'll be a lot more expensive, but it's really a numbers question. If you look at any of the indicators of chain of command, both with the armed services or with any educational facility, you're looking at 3 to 7 as a maximum structure of people that should be supervised. So that's the kind of numbers we're talking about. We're not nearly in a position to do that with principals, especially at the secondary level where a high school principal may have 200 teachers in the building.
Oh, well, hence the department head with subject matter specialities. But would you then say that the principals have become more central administration rather than teaching in their responsibilities?
I'm saying that the requirements for the administrative components of their job have distracted and detracted from their ability to spend as much time as they want to on education. They are all still educational leaders within their building, but not to the degree they may have been 30 years ago in terms of the time availability.
When you talk about collective bargaining and you want teachers all over the state to have common conditions, if you will, do you want the state to take over collective bargaining for the districts?
We would look at either a regionally based or a statewide based collective bargaining system, whether it's by county, by region, by state. We're not looking to turn teachers or other staff into state employees, but we are looking to equalize the playing field. As a number of the speakers said, what happens is there's constantly a jackrabbit approach to negotiations. If we sit down to negotiate with our staff and 3 other districts have settled, and we go to mediation or super conciliation, the first thing the mediators and conciliators look at is what did the other 3 districts get, and that's the basis of their recommendation. So it's happening anyway. It's just happening in 700 districts and spending a lot of time, money, and effort in doing that, and we think that could be better served in other ways.
Doctor, thank you. Thank you very much for your very
Thank
thoughtful
you so
testimony,
much.
too.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kevin Law, President and CEO of the Long Island Association.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. For the record, my name is Kevin S. Law, President and CEO of the Long Island Association. Good to be here before you. It's been only about a day or 2 since I've seen you last. And my friends and colleagues in the New York State Senate and the Assembly, good to see all of you. I'll be brief. I hear you're running late, and so am I. But I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for everything he's been doing for our governor, and I want to thank the governor as well for everything he's accomplished with both Dean Skelos, Shelley Silver, and the colleagues in both the Senate and the Assembly. I think you guys had a great year, and I'm hoping that this year is equally as good for you, because a good year for you means a good year for all of us New Yorkers, and we're especially pleased at the progress you made last year. I also want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for what he's done with the Regional Economic Development Councils, having the pleasure of co-chairing the Long Island Council. We're of course very happy to be one of the winners last year's competitive round of funding, and we look forward to competing in this year's round as well. Here today to share a couple of things with you that you already know, but to at least put some things on the record, at least from the business community. Long Island is a very high-cost area, and property taxes are certainly killing us. Even with the Regional Economic Development Councils, all those programs are great, and we're happy to be a participant in it. But the best thing that we could do to improve the business climate here in our region is to get some property tax relief, regulatory relief, and of course mandate relief, which I think ties in with the first two. I had the pleasure of serving on the governor's mandate relief task force last year, and so I don't envy the position you're in. We had numerous meetings, and you could spend hours discussing just one of the many mandates that have accumulated over the last 30 years. And I also understand the process. These, each law or regulation probably, most likely got approved for a good cause, good reason, a good constituent issue, and they've accumulated over the years. And I understand you're not going to be able to wave a magic wand and undo them in a short period of time. They took a long time to accumulate. They're going to take a long time to unwind. And what I would suggest to you is that, to use a ball analogy, I would look at beach balls, baseballs, and golf balls and try to identify some real big issues first that you could maybe get some points on the board with in terms of having some immediate impacts. And the ones that are going to be much more complicated and take a lot more time, you're going to need to, unfortunately, spend more time on them, and I would lump them into the baseball and golf ball, analogy. But we, again, I think the best thing that we could do to improve the business climate here is to get some mandate relief. I stood with the Lieutenant Governor and County Executive Mangano and County Executive Steve Ballone last week, supporting and praising the proposals to assist the counties with some Medicaid relief in terms of the growth of Medicaid. And that's a great start, and we're very happy to support it because as our counties do better, again, it sends a better image for our climate here in terms of trying to be competitive for economic development purposes. It would be great if the state could go further. It would be great if the state could actually take over the entire county portion of the Medicaid. And I know that's going to be costly. But if you're going to consider a pilot project out of the 62 counties, start here in Nassau and Suffolk. Let's see how it works. We certainly contribute a lot more in terms of overall dollars than we get back in return. And so to the extent you're going to experiment with that in the future, please start with a pilot project here in Nassau and Suffolk. We also, a business community, we're very supportive of your efforts to try to rein in the pension costs and supportive of the governor's proposal for a Tier 6 type of pension system. The pension costs, as we know, for our villages, our school districts, our counties and towns, they're on a trajectory that's just not sustainable. Something needs to change. And it was really, I think, remarkable when Mayor Bloomberg released his budget last week that more money goes in his budget now for pension and health benefit costs than it does for salaries of the existing employees. And I'm sure our counties and municipalities are probably not going to be far behind. So we are supportive of those efforts, and we're also supportive of anything you could do in terms of regulatory relief, because again, I think the best thing we could do to improve our climate down here is reduce some of the regulations, reduce some of the mandates, because both of those will have a positive impact on property taxes. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Kevin, thank you very much. Any questions from the panel?
Just one. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Fred, how are you?
Senator Martins has introduced a bill which I'm co-sponsoring in the Assembly with regard to the MTA payroll tax and local governments. Does exempting all local governments, now some of the smaller ones are. Does the LIA have a position on that?
Well, we haven't taken one yet. We've read it, and I've also spoken to Senator Lee Zeldin about it. I was happy to be at the announcement when the MTA tax got repealed, and no, I'm not Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy, for those of you who were there that day. And that was funny. But that was a terrific first start. I spoke directly with Dean Skelos on what you've already accomplished, and that really is going to impact about 80% of the businesses here on Long Island. So it's a great first start. We haven't looked at the exact bill that was proposed yet, but yes, certainly any relief would be welcome. But we also understand the MTA is, faced with some huge budgetary challenges as well. And what does it mean then to all of our commuters who are also taxpayers who may not then have the services with the Long Island Railroad and the mass transit? So I think we need to take a look at it. It certainly sounds something like we would support, but we haven't exactly looked at the specific language yet. But certainly sounds like an easy one to support.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick point. Good afternoon. How are you, Kevin?
Hey, Jack, how are you?
One of the themes that we get from time to time, actually pretty regularly, from our business community is that the state regulation scheme is such that it becomes overly difficult for someone to start a new business, whether there are constraints locally or whether there are constraints from state agencies that just make it difficult to invest and to create new businesses and jobs here in New York State. Given the nature of the LIA, can your organization put together some of those most onerous regulations that have impacted businesses here on Long Island so that we can review them and hopefully start taking steps, item by item, regulation by regulation, whether it's SLA when it comes to someone opening up a restaurant, whether it's a developer that faces issues with the DEC, for example. There are certainly impacts to our local businesses that come from our own regulatory scheme. Could you put together, through the Long Island Association, a list for us that this council can then review comprehensively as we sit down? Because right now we're holding hearings, but in the short term, we're also going to start holding meetings to review these regulations and review statutes literally one at a time.
Well, I think we could help you with part of that, and I think we could also do some things with the Regional Economic Development Council, because one of the things we're going to focus on this year are non-monetary recommendations that will help improve economic development here on the island, which include just things just like you're talking about. But as attorneys, we all know what the New York comprehensive compilation of codes, rules, and regulations are, and I think if you put a pile of them together, I think they'd probably reach from here to the ceiling. And so I would probably need a staff of about 100. We have a staff of 12 just to start going through that type of detailed request you made. But I think, again, if we could sort of pick off some of the low-hanging fruit, we could certainly make some recommendations and suggestions to you on some of the ones we think are the most onerous.
The beach balls.
Beach balls, yes.
Right. But, again, if you're able to, for example, reach out to your own membership and not necessarily have your staff put them together, but if they can recommend it, you can forward that to us. I think that would be helpful as well.
That's a great idea. We're in the process of doing a survey with our membership now, and maybe that's something we could include in the survey and solicit some good feedback from them directly.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great idea. Thank you.
Questions? Kevin, thank you very much.
Have a great
Thanks for your
weekend.
service.
Thank you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Our last group of speakers who have signed up before the public portion, we have 3 school board presidents, Mary Jo O'Hagan, Jim March, and Jim Caden. Please welcome them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm James March, and these are my colleagues, Mary Jo O'Hagan and Jim Caden. We do have a prepared statement, but before I go to that, I just wanted to also take the opportunity to thank the governor and this panel for giving us the opportunity to plead our case. And although I'm sure it's not necessary to point out to this panel, I'm doing more so for the media and the public that are here. I just wanted to remind them that even though we are elected officials, it's non-compensated positions, and we all had to make arrangements in our other livelihood in order to get here. And the reason I'm saying that is not to pat ourselves on the back, because we do accept our responsibilities here. But I think it's more to put an exclamation point on the importance that we do put on this panel, and we truly believe that decisions going forth made by this panel will truly determine the future of public education in New York State. So, our association is here today on behalf of Nassau and Suffolk's Boards of Education, the recipients of the can kicked down the road from Albany. I thank the Council for providing the opportunity to give voice to the frustrations of local board members who are struggling to fulfill their elected responsibility to protect the education and fiscal integrity of their community schools. Board members of long-standing service can recall no time more dire for Long Island and its public schools. The budgets currently being prepared for voter approval reflect the reality of the tough economy, as well as the cumulative impact of multiple years of frozen or slashed state education funding. What those budgets do not reflect is the promised significant mandate relief that was to accompany the imposition of New York State's cap on the school levy. To little avail, school boards have long decried the burden placed on education budgets for the costs of mandates imposed by other levels of government. The charge given to this Mandate Relief Council provides us with a glimmer of hope that you will direct the state legislature to either repeal, relax, or fully fund the costly mandates that continue to plague school districts and local taxpayers. The $20 billion gap between revenues and costs projected in 5 years for New York's schools demands long-term relief from the major cost drivers. However, the current fiscal constraints on education budgets calls for some immediate and decisive relief from those mandates that are diverting scarce local education dollars to fund state responsibilities. Major cost drivers over which schools have little or no control should be the initial and primary focus of the Council. It is some of those that our association's officers wish to quickly highlight today. It is right that attention is being paid to the explosion of costs attributed to New York's public pension systems. Pension sweeteners obtained not at the local bargaining table, but as Albany giveaways play a significant role in the dilemma we now face. When the rapidly escalating costs of pension contributions collide with spending constraints imposed by New York's school levy cap, it is educational opportunity that suffers. A thorough analysis should be conducted of potential cost savings of a reduced defined benefit plan and a new defined contribution plan. If warranted, the creation of Tier 6 should proceed. Make this the year that New York's local and state taxpayers are no longer required to waste the hundreds of millions of dollars it costs to fund the arcane restrictions imposed by the Wicks law. New York remains the last state in the nation to cling to the costly Wicks law. Establish a separate funding mechanism for charter schools. Relieve communities of the mandate to turn over local tax dollars of state-imposed charter schools that are not locally accountable. School district budgets are facing increased pupil transportation costs. The state should fund or reduce mileage limits from 15 to 5 miles for private school out-of-district transportation. New York school districts should be permitted to leverage the aggregate purchasing power of large national procurement cooperatives and contracts entered into by other states and local governments. For 2 decades, the growth in special education expenditures has far outpaced those for regular education students. Without assistance from the state, these costs will continue to grow exponentially within a finite school budget. Savings can be achieved through conforming New York special education mandates to those of the federal government. Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association is prepared to assist the Council with any additional information requested on the mandates referred to in our testimony. As part of our tag team, Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association Vice President Mary Jo O'Hagan will continue.
I'm Mary Jo O'Hagan, Vice President of the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association and President of the Baldwin Board of Education. While schools and local taxpayers are forced to wait for promised significant mandate relief, this year's bare-bones school budgets will be required to absorb additional costs of some new mandates. Should the legislature support the governor's executive budget proposal, local school budgets would be forced to take on the burden of cost shifts from what were county and state funding responsibilities for preschool special education and summer school. County Executive Steve Ballone's pleasure is unfortunately our pain. Based on the misperception that schools should take responsibility for the cost of a system they don't control, this cost shift would result in a $20 million new unfunded mandate. The executive budget would also shift from the state to local school districts 1/2 of the costs of 3020A hearings. A better solution would be to establish a state arbitration panel and thereby relieve the state education department of the costs of private arbitrators. In addition, the executive budget would shift onto local school budgets 1/2 of the costs of the Regents testing program and GED exams. The state should bear the cost of its own testing and accountability system. In what amounts to one of the costliest administrative mandates in decades, the state's annual professional performance review requirements are driving local costs far in excess of the funding provided by the state. The state should either assume a greater share of the cost of this new initiative or reconsider its burdensome administrative mandates. School budgets should not be a repository for shifts of burdensome costs from the state and other levels of government. This is no time to unload additional costs onto local property taxpayers. Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association calls for a moratorium on all new mandates that are not funded by the state. All existing mandates should be amended to include a sunsetting provision. Only those that are deemed essential should be reinstated. And now Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association past president Jim Caden will complete our testimony.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Any meaningful attempt to contain school costs must garner savings from the portion of the school budget that covers staff and salaries. While it is the school board that ultimately controls salaries, a number of state mandates often hamper the negotiation strategies of school districts. Significant in its ability to weaken the school board's bargaining position is the Triborough Amendment to the Triborough Doctrine. This provision mandates that continuation of step increases throughout the period of the negotiations, despite the absence of an agreed-upon contract. School districts should not be required to pay wage increases under an expired contract. The Triborough Amendment should be changed to state that salaries should be maintained at the rate set in the expired agreement, but without further enhancement through step increases during the contract hiatus. Schools can be staffed differently today than they have been in the past. Technological innovations are poised to create new ways to deliver instruction. Mandates that impede greater efficiency through distance learning or team teaching must be done away with. School boards are not privy to the ongoing negotiations among the State Ed Department, NYSERD, and the Governor. Should agreement be reached on the utilization of evaluations to determine teacher effectiveness, districts should be allowed to consider factors other than seniority when making decisions regarding teacher layoffs. Last year we talked about no tax cap without mandate reform, yet we have a tax cap. There's no time to spare. With the imposition of the school tax levy cap, any unwarranted or underfunded state mandates means a cut to local school programs. The school budgets that go to our communities in May will bear witness to the hard choices made by local boards of education. It is time for the state to do its part and honor its commitment to deliver meaningful mandate relief. Thank you for your consideration of these proposals. We look forward to benefiting from the significant changes in New York's relationship with its local school districts.
Thank you all, and thank you all for taking your time to be here. Comments, questions?
I have some, sure. With regard to procurement contracts, allowing school districts to avail themselves of these national procurement contracts, would you agree that there is a benefit to having state dollars and public dollars spent locally in New York State, promoting local businesses and local industries and local jobs, as opposed to necessarily saving oftentimes a minuscule amount, but sending that to another state or sending it to another part of the country?
We've had that debate many times on our local school board, and we've had various people who favor trying to put in rules that say we need to buy locally and things. And while I think there are certainly benefits to the community of doing that, in the realities of the tax cap age, I don't believe we can afford to be the source of funding. So if funding comes with that and says we'll give you a certain amount of incentivization to provide local work and local jobs, I don't think we'd be opposed to that, or I wouldn't be opposed to it certainly. But if it means that I need to pay more for a service I can get for less in the reality of the tax cap, I don't know that I would be in favor of that.
I think it's a question of degree. Frankly, if we're talking about a small amount, certainly there has to be, and I would agree, there should be a certain amount of discretion. If you're dealing with a tremendous amount of money, obviously you do not want to undercut your own ability to provide basic services for children in your school districts. But I don't think that there's a black and white answer to that issue as well.
If you remove the barriers to that, though, it could become a local issue to decide whether they wish to do that or not, and that would be a good way to do that, perhaps.
That's certainly a thought. Thank you.
Senator Marzullo.
Yeah. I think most of you were in the audience when we talked about my overall question. If you could pick one of the mandates that you feel is most onerous, that you would like to see gone, that would help you immediately, what would you want?
Oh, okay. Okay.
We may have differing opinions here, but it's probably the one that has the least chance of being approved or removed. And
Does it begin with a T?
Yes, it does.
And you brought up the Triborough amendment. I think there's, well, first off, obviously, I think nearly 70% of every school district's budget is comprised of salary and benefits. So negotiations are obviously key to controlling those costs. I think there's a misunderstanding that removal of the Triborough amendment has other ramifications, prevents strikes, et cetera, et cetera. All that does is then refer to the Triborough doctrine, which maintains everybody's benefits and everything. All we're looking to do is freeze the salary, because I just do not see any advantage. You know, we want to deal on a level playing field at the negotiation table. And why would a bargaining unit want to give back a guaranteed step increase that's already beyond what the tax levy cap limit sets? So, you know, until that's removed, our hands are extremely tied.
If I might add to that a little bit, I fully agree with Mr. March. The Triborough Amendment would be my choice. And I'll tell you, it does create also, right now, an interesting situation in some districts. Mine is one of them. Our teacher's contract expires in June, and we're beginning negotiations. And in the reality of our economic times, obviously, we're looking to hold the line on salaries and things, which will undoubtedly lead to a protracted negotiation session due to the Triborough Amendment in part, and many other things, factors besides that. But the complication that comes with that is the threat the governor has made of any district who does not negotiate APPR within a year will lose their increase in state aid. Well, the chances of us negotiating that while we're also trying to negotiate beneficial salary adjustments and things and our thing is nil. So now I'm forced to put up a budget now and ask my public, and I have to think about how to do this. Do I include the state aid increase in my revenues against the cap? Or do I cut that extra amount out of my budget now, knowing full well that if he makes good on his threat, I'll lose that in mid-year? That's not a good position to be in. I think personally, and I know you've asked local control a little bit on other things, I would like to see APPR negotiated by law as opposed to individual school districts. It would give us something on the table that would give school districts, school boards a little bit of power in this situation to offset things like the Triborough Amendment. We wouldn't have to negotiate something away to get that. That would become our bargaining chip that's on the table already when we start. So I would ask you to consider that as well.
Since there's three of us, can I get to have a first choice?
Sure.
Since it's a little bit
We
different.
will make a special dispensation and allow that.
Thank you, thank you. I would say I would have to go for repealing the supermajority. We happen to believe in the constitutional,
You mean in overriding the cap?
Yes.
yes, supermajority goes against the entire concept of one person, one vote. In my own home district, we have had meetings till midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning for the last couple of weeks, because in addition to closing schools, reducing staff, raising class size, we are eliminating a half-day kindergarten program. We have extremely unhappy parents who might consider adding an extra % to the budget, but the chance that that budget would be defeated and we would then be faced with an additional $3 million in cutting above and beyond all of the things we've already proposed, make that a very unlikely scenario. We really, as representatives of local governance and advocating for local governance, we feel that those choices should be made at the local level, and they should be made in a fair way where the votes are not weighted in such a way that a person who is voting against a school budget actually has more weight to their vote than the person who's advocating for the school budget. So that would be my choice.
Am I right in understanding the comments on Triborough is that you're not advocating, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not advocating the elimination of the Triborough amendment in total. You're advocating freezing it. When the contract ends, there are no other payments other than whatever the salary is at that point.
That step
No additional-
provisions are not
nothing-
enforced.
Nothing goes additional, but it's not elimination of the Triborough. It's kind of
No,
maintaining the status quo at that point.
yes.
That's what I meant by
Yes.
referring
Right.
to the Triborough Doctrine.
Elimination of step
I
increases.
just want to make
only.
that clear for the record, because, you know, the talk about elimination of it would mean that you would go back to the system where once the contract was ended, the district would be absolved of paying anybody anything.
No.
And that's not what you're advocating.
No.
You're advocating a freeze.
Just the amendment that added step
Gotcha.
increases.
I got you. That's fine. Thank you.
Many years ago, the Court of Appeals actually upheld a challenge where the Court of Appeals agreed that step should not continue, and then legislation was shortly thereafter passed to bring it back, and that's what is the amendment.
Now, to implement, in order to implement the APPR as we understand the APPR today, the requirements of the APPR, your districts will have to pay for third-party testing, professional development in order to implement the program, local assessment of every student, even those students in music classes, and I'm not quite sure how anyone's going to do that. You're gonna have to pay for the data collection and its analysis. And on the subject of the RTI, that's the response to intervention, you're going to have to pay to screen every student in the lower grades. And that's not to mention the record keeping. So, I don't know, do you have a sense? I mean, I take it you view each of these requirements as an unfunded mandate.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And can you give us a sense of what you think it's gonna cost your district to implement this program?
Yep,
May
go
I
ahead.
just want to
Certainly.
answer because I happen to have those figures from September to now. In my district, we have spent $84,000 in time. We have spent another $80,000 in materials so far. We have been awarded $100,000 over 4 years. So we have vastly exceeded the amount. And the other thing that has been a very serious impact is we have spent a total of well over 500 staff days. That's people away from their desks working on this when they were not working on putting together a school budget and moving us forward in other educational arenas. So between the amount of time everybody from central office staff to supervisory staff to teachers who have been away from their desks or out of their classrooms, it has totaled over 500 working days since September.
I have the extreme good fortune of being married to a retired public school educator. And one of her greatest frustrations in the last years of her teaching experience was the number of days she was taken out of her classroom for counseling by some specialized instructor. And this is a master teacher. So I understand your frustration. Now, the money you spent, that's just preliminary
Absolutely.
money.
That's since September, that money has been spent.
Our concern is that the ramifications of the negotiated appeal process, which will undoubtedly, any bad review will undoubtedly be appealed, which will increase legal fees exponentially.
Yes.
I couldn't even begin to give you a figure on what that will be.
We have time for one more question, whoever's.
I'm wondering if you can offer up how much you currently spend on teacher evaluation in your districts and what you estimate additional costs would be under APPR.
I couldn't write offhand. We can certainly look into that for you because we ask for various kind of things. Those kind of things at times are hard to disaggregate. If you have an assistant principal, unless you're going to eliminate the assistant principal who does observations, it's hard to say how much of it was
But
dedicated to
you
evaluation.
understand
or
my
not.
point about why it's important to get there if everyone's concerned about it.
Yes, I do understand your point.
Okay.
And one other point I would like to make to the committee, and it's not directly related to a mandate relief, it's, I believe this state and all states should take a very careful look before they accept federal money in the world of education. Very few of the federal programs we have enacted, Race to the Top to be the latest, but No Child Left Behind, IDEA, have come with anywhere near the funding required to implement them. And yet we rapidly adopt those programs to get the King's nickel, codify them into our regulations, so even if a local district wanted to, it makes no sense to say, well, we don't want your money, we want to do this. And I think it's time in the economic conditions this country is in that we take a long, hard look as a state before we accept federal regulations in education.
I just want to thank you all. I'm just looking at the clock. We are well over. I probably go on for quite a few more minutes on this, but I want to thank the three of you for taking the time to come here and being a part of this, and thanks for your very thoughtful testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we are going to move to the next, this is the public portion. We have 5 people who have signed up, and I want to make sure we hear everybody. I'm just going to ask that we adhere to the 3 minutes per person, and sometimes the questions take a lot longer than that, but the first speaker will be from a member of the New York State Assembly, Dean Murray.
Thank you to all of you, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for coming down, and welcome back to Long Island. I see my Assembly colleagues have left for the moment, but my Senate colleagues are here, and thank you. Thank you to the rest of the Council. I will be very brief, as I'm wearing 2 hats today. One is State Assemblyman, and for that purpose, I won't rehash what's been said today. Obviously, we put in place the 2% tax cap. It's our duty now to work with the local governments, with the school districts, to enact real mandate relief, to help them and partner with them in helping them keep their budgets under the 2%. I think it's extremely important. I'm now going to take the Assembly hat off and put on my small business owner hat. I'm a small business owner myself, and one of the things that hasn't, or one of the things I think should be pointed out is the mandates that we impose on businesses throughout the state. As you probably know, the Tax Foundation just released its latest rankings. Once again, New York was 49th out of 50. Only New Jersey had a less business-friendly environment, if you will. And they quoted the tax burden and the numerous overburdensome regulations as the reason for our low ranking. Now, I'd like to thank the governor and my colleagues, because I think we've taken tremendous steps over the past year or so to turn that around. The Regional Economic Development Councils, perfect example. Some of the investments we are making in growing our economy, as well as our dedication to improving our infrastructure. All of this is great. I mean, we are moving forward, and I think we're going in the right direction to make this a more business-friendly environment. But there's a lot that has to be done to help the small business owners, a lot more. I came in a special election in February of 2010. When I came to the floor of the Assembly, one of the first debates that we had on the floor was a debate about having small business owners, or actually any business that sells extension cords. They would have to go to classes put on by the State Department of Labor to educate them on how to pick out a fraudulent underwriter laboratory seal on the extension cords. And the reason for this was because an Assembly member, someone had a fire in their district, and it was a tragic fire, and they determined it was a faulty extension cord that caused the fire. So the knee-jerk reaction was, we're going to put this law into place, so we're going to require all of the mom and pops to go and examine, first go to class, take time out of their day to go to class to learn how to identify a fraudulent UL seal. Then, if one slips by them and it happens to sell and be involved in a fire, they're now liable. This is crazy. I mean, what shocked me when I got to the floor of the Assembly was, and this is not in any way to disparage any of our lawmakers, but I think it's great that we have diversity there, people coming from all different types of backgrounds, but there are very few with a business background, very few that have actually run a business, in the legislature. So they don't understand that sometimes it might not come with a dollar amount. The mandate that we're imposing or the law that we're passing, it may not come with a dollar figure that we can say it'll cost this business X amount. But time is money. For a small business owner to pull them away from what they do and what they're doing, especially now in these trying times when they're struggling, trying to make ends meet, to pull them away to do something like that task I described, is ridiculous. And we have to recognize the impacts of these laws, and we've heard it over and over again today, the unintended consequences and the good intentions. You know, that was a good intended bill, but it wasn't realistic. These are the types of things that we also, while we're tackling some of the major issues and the big beach balls, we have to examine some of the golf balls too. Some of the ones that are hurting the small businesses and you know, all businesses throughout New York State. We have to understand that it doesn't always come with a dollar amount. Sometimes it goes deeper than that, and it affects all of us. It can affect jobs, and it, unfortunately, it's one of the reasons why we are ranked as low as we are. But I think we are taking strides to move that forward, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel?
Hey, guys, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next speaker is Frank Russo from the Long Island for Education Reform.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Pension reform is the first suggestion. We have 5 specific recommendations. Pension reform is the first one. I fully agree with Jack on the stability problem, but the far greater problem on pensions is the generosity of the pension formula. It is far more generous than any private company was ever. 2% a year for teachers, 2.5% for policemen, and so forth. So we've got to change the formula, number one, with Tier 6, and number 2, increase the employee contributions. If their pensions are going to be so generous, they should be paying a bigger share of it. Second one is, as they mentioned just prior, the Triborough Amendment. Absolutely essential, and I know this is a key. The key problem we're facing is that the public employee unions are so powerful that both political parties up in Albany are terrified of them, and they won't do the right thing. Governor Cuomo has shown a lot of courage in what he did the first year. Seems to be chickening out on the Triborough Amendment, and I have a feeling the legislature is going to chicken out. That's a shame. The Triborough Amendment is critical if you're going to give our school boards a fair shot at negotiating a fair contract that's fair not only for the employees, but for the taxpayers. So you got to choose as legislators whether you're going to side with the public employee unions or the taxpayers. I think I know the answer. You're going to side with the unions. Triborough Amendment is terrible. It puts the teachers in a tremendously powerful position. The parents get nervous with the teachers unhappy about not having a contract, and the board suffers all the pressure. The teachers should not be getting the increases, and I agree with what you said, Carl. It's the exact definition that we only freeze the salaries. You don't take away their benefits or anything of that sort, but you are taking away the step increases so that they're under pressure just like the board members are. Wick's Law, third one. Wick's Law is another ridiculous. Every school board is opposed to Wick's Law. It's the construction unions that want it. Instead of hiring one general contractor, you got to deal with 4 separate unions. A lot of wasted time. A lot of union members sitting on their rear ends instead of doing work because of the poor scheduling ability when you're dealing with 4 different unions. Eliminate Wick's. It's a no-brainer. Fourth one, tenure. We've got to change the tenure law. When teachers have to be laid off, why do we lay off the young teachers who are better than many of the older teachers? Do it on a performance basis. Allow the school districts, in behalf of the quality of education interests of the students, to discharge people not based on who's there longest, but based on who's the better performer. Tenure should not be decided in 3 years. The school boards also agree on this. It should be 5 years, and it'd be better too if we make it renewable. So I've discussed Triborough, pension, tenure, Wick's. The last one, this is a good example too of the power of the unions. It's called the Education Investment Incentive Act. In the Senate it was 2732, in the Assembly it's 5081. 15 years, Senator Bruno, Assemblyman Silva would not allow it to come to a vote. We had 20 Democrats in the Assembly, 20 Republicans in the Senate co-sponsoring this legislation, which provides a significant tax credit, a 60% tax credit for donations to public schools or private school scholarship funds. As a professional, I had 30 years at AT&T and Verizon. Half of my career was spent in pricing and cost. I was director of pricing and costing. I'm an expert as a professional on this. I did an analysis on what this bill would do. By donating to public schools, you get a 60% credit, puts a limit $100 million for the public school donations, $100 million for the private school. End result is the state loses $200 million in taxes, tax credits. The public schools save $500 million, $400 to $500 million. It's a no-brainer. I tried to figure out why this wasn't allowed to come to a vote. Finally found out from 4 experts, legislators, who told me privately. It's because the public school teacher unions want the private schools to close. We got 6 Catholic schools, as you know, closing in Long Island. We got probably 20 of them closing across the state. The public school unions love that. It creates more jobs, but it puts a burden on the taxpayers. This bill helps public schools raise money in a cost-effective way. They'd collect $165 million at a cost of $100 million to the taxpayers. Private schools would get the same thing for scholarships. It would help poor income, low income, middle income districts give scholarships of $5,000 to kids to come to out of a failing public school, save the taxpayers money. Taxpayers save $500 million at a cost of $200 million. Senator Skelos, to his credit, allowed it to come to a vote finally after 15 years of Bruno not allowing it, came to a vote in June and it passed 55-7. It's a no-brainer. But Sheldon Silva kowtows to the teacher unions. He won't allow it to come to a vote. It's a disgrace. Everybody wins with this. Students, parents, taxpayers. Only the public school teacher unions who want the private schools to close to give them more union jobs oppose it. And Sheldon Silva kowtows to them at a time like this when it's critical. We have a tax cap. This bill will enable public schools to raise money in a cost-effective way and help overcome the problems created by the tax cap. And we favor the tax cap. I give you credit for passing the tax cap. That's where I differ with those prior speakers. Thank you very much. If there are any questions,
Mr.
be happy
Russo,
to
thank
take
you.
them.
Any questions, comments?
Didn't think so.
Thank you, sir, very much. Thank you for taking the time and being here. Next, Ross Coleman, New York State Camp Directors Association.
First off, as one of only, it looks like a handful of private citizens, not an elected official, this has been great. I wish, probably not for you who has 9 more to do, but I think that it would be great if more of the residents of New York State saw our government at work. It is also very encouraging to see the bipartisan nature, so much of that not happening in our country. It's been very refreshing as a New Yorker to see this happening now, so thank you. I am speaking in my role as president of the New York State Camp Directors Association. I myself am an owner-operator of a private day camp and a for-profit day camp. I'm not speaking on my behalf. I'm speaking, as we often do up in Albany, and I've enjoyed a terrific relationship with many legislators on behalf of our not-for-profit friends in the camp world. A bill that has been talked about, or introduced, I should say, that has plans where in order to keep a not-for-profit status, or in order to keep, a tax-exempt status for these not-for-profits, land would have to have a plan to be developed within 5 years, and would have to be developed within 7. When you think about the nature of these not-for-profit camps and who they serve, the land that you're talking about developing, the very purpose of that land is for it not to be developed for hiking, for horseback riding, for general nature types of programming. A lot of these properties are also as buffers to areas where you would not want directly next to the kids. We also are providing thousands of jobs in the community. When I hear everything that's spoken about today, as a taxpayer, I am all for it all of it. But I do caution when I kept hearing about the best of intentions to please keep in mind, I know this has to get funded somewhere. So when you are looking for ways to fund a lot of these things, I ask you to keep in mind, not that I've heard it be discussed, I don't think that is something that you're currently looking at, but on behalf of those not-for-profit camps who are serving a population that otherwise would not attend camp, many of them from inner city neighborhoods who are getting the chance to go up into the country, if you will, and to have a chance to ride a horse, to go on a nature walk, this would all be lost. And also you would lose a lot of green property, if you will, as well. So I just ask that you keep that in mind as you do go forward in this process. I am not envious of the task. I am encouraged what I've heard, and I thank you for the time.
Mr. Coleman, thank you. Any comments or questions?
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, Jack Dolch, President of the Board of Education, Locust Valley.
Thank you. Let me first compliment the council on holding the hearing today, and I also want to thank my local representatives who have heard much of what I have said already, Assemblyman Levine and Senator Marcellino. I'm going to try and go quickly. I have a few things that I would like to say. Some of them have been mentioned, but my focus at the end is a little bit different. First, I'd like to say that I appreciate the look at alleviation of mandate relief, but there is very little in what I've read so far at what you're focusing on that is going to give significant, in fact, any relief for school districts in the immediate future. I think the fact that we have pension relief based on a new tier is terrific, and that's going to help school districts as it will help all municipalities over time. I don't advocate changing the current pension system. I do agree if a promise is made, a promise is made. But pensions for the future are a great, reform for the future is a great thing, but it doesn't help us right now. And then when we talk about early intervention and preschool special education, by your own numbers that you had here, you talk about $250 million over 5 years, which is $50 million a year. The burden on local school districts right now is $10 billion. So what you're focusing on is 1/2 of 1% of a relief. And other than that, I don't really see anything here that we're focusing on. I want to talk about how serious the problem is. The Commissioner of Education himself has said that in the near future, many school districts are going to go bankrupt. They can't go bankrupt, so that means the state's going to take them over, and we saw what happened with Roosevelt. The estimate is that in 18 months, 60 schools, or 60 school districts, or 8% of the total school districts in New York will not be able to pay their bills. Already we've laid off 300,000 teachers, or 10% of the total teachers in New York State. The Regents estimates that by the year 2016-17, the districts will be spending $80 billion with the opportunity to collect in revenue from all sources $62 billion. So we're already projecting 5 years out an $18 billion gap. My guess is it's going to be bigger. Commissioner goes on to say, without significant aid and relief from costly mandates, districts will not be able to pull themselves away from the abyss. And he's right. The problem is that the Commissioner, more than any single person, is causing this mandate problem. He also goes on to say that he has greater concern about education insolvency, and that's true. In which districts lose the ability to provide a quality education. He said some schools are cutting back academics, including programs like advanced placement courses. It's true. That make their graduates less competitive. Early education has taken a hit. We have school districts all over Long Island, all over the state that have dramatically cut back on key issues for us to be competitive in the future. And who is doing this? You know something? I take a little bit of a different position than most of the people here. I'm not crazy about some of the pension expenses we have. I certainly don't like Triborough. I like to see some relief, and I like to get some help on these things. But we'll make do. We'll somehow make do with all of these things if we have to. What we can't make do with is the absolute authority of the state regents and the Board of Education to put whatever mandates they want on us, whenever they want, without even knowing what they're doing. Who at the state board of, on the Board of Regents is an expert in public education? Tell me. We rank 38th in the country. 38th in the country, and we spend billions of dollars. I'm sure you're aware that last year in 2011, after billions of dollars of more mandates put on us by the regents, we were the only state in the country that had falling reading scores in 2011. The only state in the country that had falling reading scores last year after all the mandates they put on. Where is the accountability? Where is the accountability? I'm going to give you a couple of specific numbers, and some of them relate to us. Last year, we were promised mandate relief. As you know, you tried. We didn't get any. But we could live almost without no mandate relief. Do you know that there are billions of dollars in new mandates that are put on school districts this year by the regents? Billions. Billions. The race to the top in order to collect that $780 million, nobody looked at the other side of the ledger. Nobody said, what are school districts going to have to spend to implement this? I'm going to tell you what our school district is going to spend. It's a small school district. We're going to spend to implement all the mandates that the regents has put on us, including the change to the core curriculum, APPR, and time with intervention. It's going to cost us next year we've done the numbers. It's going to cost us $2.1 million to do this properly. Do you know what our tax cap is? $1.6 million. Do you know how much we're going to increase? Do you know what our total compensation increase is to all our employees next year in our school district, including our teachers and everybody? including pension, including Triborough, including all benefits, it's less than the mandate which the Regents is giving us. These are all our employees, all our teachers. People are screaming about pension and all this stuff. They're giving us more of a mandate than anybody. We can't pay it. And here's the thing that really bothers us and really bothers our community. And our representatives know this. And many school districts are like this on Long Island. We rank, in a study which was done recently, of 27,000 school districts nationally, Locust Valley ranked 137, the top 1/2 of 1% school districts nationally. Last year, we graduated 100% of our students. 96% went on to college and were accepted to every university or college in the top 50. All the Ivy League schools, we were accepted. Not everybody went there, but we were accepted to every single school. 82% of our students take a college-level course. 81% received the Advanced Regents Diploma, which is the highest diploma that New York State will give out. 58% of our special needs students achieved an advanced diploma, and 100% of our special needs students received a Regents Diploma. And yet, with all of these demographics that I'm telling you about, these metrics, we are still only the 7th highest school district rated on Long Island. And with that, in fact, and I give you this not because we're bragging or something's different, because it's our responsibility to do what we can. Who is the Regents to come in now and tell us that we have to change our curriculum? We're dumbing down our curriculum. And it's cost us millions of dollars to dummy down our curriculum. We have to evaluate our teachers based on 97 criteria that they set up. Our teachers are very successful. We don't get 100% graduation rate if we don't know what we're doing. And now they're going to tell us how much time each student has to spend in intervention. You know what we do with intervention? We identify a specific problem that somebody has. And we identify that problem and we get them in with intensity and we get them out quickly so they can go take the other courses which they need to do. No more. You know that if that student has a problem, the new intervention says he's got to take these, he's got to be in this program for such a long period of time, for the entire period, and they mandate the exact minutes. Who in the Regents understands what public education is better than the administrators and the teachers in the state? And so I say to you this, when are you going to do something, or can you do something about this? Because this is what's going to kill public education. All the other stuff, pension, we'll work with this. We'll get through it somehow. But if you don't do something about this, New York State is going the way of California. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Anita McDougall from the Long Island Tax Reform.
Thank you for the opportunity. I've listened to the comments, and many of them are very good, and I agree with two in particular: pension reform and repeal of the Triborough Amendment. A Tier 6 pension reform with a defined contribution option is to be applauded. It will certainly help budgets in the future. It's a needed long-term change, long-term being the operative term. However, the taxpayer and the school districts need more immediate assistance. That would be accomplished by repeal of the 30-year-old Triborough Amendment, which fuels the escalating salary component that feeds into the high property taxes that we have in Nassau County and is destroying businesses and is destroying families' ability to survive here. An individual school district is truly powerless in contract negotiations when the old contract continues with all benefits and all step increases. Triborough Amendment repeal would even out the negotiation process. The New York State School Boards Association and the New York Conference of Mayors are in favor of repeal. Our elected representatives should also be in favor of repeal for the fiscal future of New York State. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Well, that brings to a close our hearing. I would like to just close by, first of all, on behalf of Governor Cuomo, I would like to thank our panel. I would like to thank members of the Executive Chamber who came down, and most importantly, our Long Island State elected officials who took time out of their day to be here. I want to thank all the speakers who signed up from various agencies who took the time to come, and I especially want to thank the members of the public who came here to speak and waited to the very end, almost 3 hours to be heard. The passion, the candor, I think the direct conversation is very, very helpful in this process. Our job on behalf of the governor is to listen. Our job is to take down and have what you say be part of the record, to be part of the discussions, not only with the task force itself, but we have members of the Assembly and the Senate here as well. And I just will go back and say that the things that were said, the way you said it, I think your candor, your directness today, and everything you said was greatly appreciated by all of us. So I thank you for your time, for being a part of it. And this is the very first one that we've had. So if they're all like this, I think the governor would agree it's going to be a huge success. So have a great day, and thank you so much.